Windsor is holding its breath tonight. The story dominating headlines across Britain isn't about tradition, duty, or ceremony. It's about eviction. After years of controversy, the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, is set to lose Royal Lodge, the 30-room Windsor estate he has called home for nearly 2 decades. The official order has been issued, signed under the authority of the Crown Estate, and the countdown has begun. By next spring, the gates will close, and the last of the Queen Mother's legacy will fall silent. But insiders warn, nothing about this departure will be quiet. In November, as the chill spreads through Windsor Great Park, Andrew remains inside the lodge, rarely seen but constantly watched. Drone images, long-lens photographs, and whispers from staff paint the same picture. A man surrounded by fading grandeur, refusing to let go. Sources close to the palace confirm that King Charles has grown impatient, determined to finalize the restructuring of crown properties before the 2nd anniversary of his reign. One courtier, speaking anonymously, described the move as a necessary reform wrapped in personal heartbreak. Royal Lodge isn't just real estate. It's a symbol of entitlement, of defiance, and of the shifting balance of power inside the monarchy. For years, it stood as Andrew's last fortress, after losing military titles and royal duties in the aftermath of the Epstein scandal. Even stripped of his official role, he clung to the house his mother once adored. He believes it's his inheritance by sentiment, said a former equerry. But sentiment doesn't pay for the repairs, and sentiment doesn't repair the monarchy's image. Public opinion has turned frost cold. Commentators from the Times to late-night talk shows ask the same question. Why does a man without royal duties still occupy one of the Crown's most valuable residences? Parliament members have quietly raised concerns over costs, while palace advisors scramble to contain the optics. And yet, even with mounting pressure, Andrew has refused to vacate. According to one insider, he told aides he will not leave until he's forced to, or until the king himself asks, face to face. That meeting, some say, is imminent. But the drama doesn't end at the eviction notice. Several palace insiders claim that during the final handover process, certain items inside Royal Lodge have sparked renewed interest. The discovery of unfiled correspondence and sealed boxes, remnants of last year's so-called garage inspection, has triggered a discreet review by Crown Estate auditors. Officials insist it's routine, but the timing, coming just months before Andrew's removal, has ignited speculation. It feels like they're making sure nothing embarrassing is left behind, one royal watcher noted. Not after what happened last time. Behind the scenes, family dynamics are stretched thin. Princess Anne, ever the pragmatist, is said to favor a clean resolution, while Prince William has been drawn reluctantly into discussions about logistics and optics. He's caught between empathy and duty, said a senior correspondent. He remembers the human cost of exile. He saw it in his mother, but he also knows the crown can't afford another scandal. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla's influence looms quietly but unmistakably. Multiple sources confirm she has encouraged decisiveness within the palace, urging Charles to act before spring. One insider put it bluntly, she wants the past cleared out, physically and symbolically. The monarchy can't modernize while ghosts of the old scandals still live rent-free in Windsor. For Andrew, the silence is both his armor and his prison. He rarely leaves the property, seen occasionally on short drives, accompanied by a single aide. Locals say the once bustling estate now feels deserted. The laughter, the garden parties, the sense of privilege replaced by an air of suspended judgment. A royal historian summed it up perfectly. Royal Lodge is no longer a home. It's a headline waiting to happen. And perhaps that's why everyone's watching so closely. Because when the locks change next spring, it won't just be the end of a lease, it'll be the end of an era. What happens inside those walls before that day arrives could determine how this chapter of the Windsor story is remembered. As a quiet closure, or a final explosive reckoning. Stay with us. This winter in Windsor may be colder than anyone imagined. The envelope arrived without ceremony, ivory paper, embossed with the royal crest, delivered by hand through the side gate of Royal Lodge. Inside, the message was short and deliberate. Formal notice of relocation, effective by the first week of spring. There was no signature from the king, only the seal of the Crown Estate and the clipped tone of bureaucracy. But make no mistake, everyone at Windsor knew whose decision it was, and they also knew who had helped push it through. Within hours, word leaked to the press. The Duke of York to vacate Royal Lodge by spring, read the BBC's headline, echoed by every tabloid and talk show across the country. Footage of the lodge's grand facade filled the evening bulletins, but behind those stone walls, tension was thick. Sources inside the household say Andrew reacted with fury. He called it humiliation disguised as reform, one longtime staff member told us. He feels like the family wants him erased, room by room. How so? According to insiders, Andrew spent that same evening drafting a letter to Prince William, described by one aide as a plea for decency. The Duke asked his nephew to intervene, arguing that the decision was not only unfair but ungrateful after years of service under his late mother. He still sees himself as the Queen's loyal son, said a senior correspondent familiar with the exchange. But that's no longer the currency that counts. Buckingham Palace, meanwhile, moved quickly to frame the story. A spokesperson described the move as part of an ongoing modernization of royal properties. The phrase sounded neutral, but palace watchers read between the lines. Modernization has become the polite word for exile. And behind that word, whispers point to one person, Queen Camilla. According to multiple royal insiders, it was she who urged Charles to finalize the eviction before the second coronation anniversary. She sees the Royal Lodge as a lingering reminder of the Queen Mother's court, the old Windsor world that never accepted her, explained a veteran palace reporter. Clearing it out isn't just administrative, it's psychological. It's no secret that Camilla's growing influence has reshaped the inner rhythm of the monarchy. Since stepping fully into the role of queen, she has consolidated the household, reduced overlapping staff, and restructured access to royal estates. But this move, removing Andrew from the home most associated with his late mother, carries symbolism that no amount of PR can soften. To many Britons, it looks like a purge. As one insider put it, the Queen wants stability, the King wants reform, but both agree on one thing: there can be no more headlines about Andrew. He's the unfinished business they can't afford. Public sentiment mirrors that fatigue. Polls show overwhelming support for reclaiming Royal Lodge, especially after reports that Andrew's upkeep and security costs continue to draw from public funds. Commentators on morning radio have labeled it the most overdue eviction in royal history. But not everyone sees it as justice. A former palace footman, who once worked under the late Queen Mother, called it cruel theater. His words echoed through social media. This isn't reform, it's rewriting history to erase the inconvenient ones. In the press, debate rages between accountability and compassion. Should a disgraced prince be granted a quiet retirement, or must he serve as an example of royal consequence? That's the dilemma, notes historian Emily Street John. The monarchy trades in myth. Myths require villains, and right now, Andrew fits the part perfectly. Yet, the story has taken another twist. Sources confirm that the Crown Estate's legal team has requested a full inventory of the lodge's contents. Standard protocol, they insist, before a handover. But palace insiders whisper that the order came after an internal memo surfaced last month, referencing unverified materials retained post-audit. In plainer words, there may still be items from the infamous garage inspection, items never surrendered. That discovery has triggered new scrutiny. According to one senior source, they don't want any surprises. The last inspection nearly brought down what was left of his credibility. The same source claims a private security detail, separate from the king's household staff, has been assigned to oversee compliance. And while the palace publicly maintains a tone of dignity, the atmosphere inside Windsor has turned electric. Servants speak in whispers, contractors come and go without eye contact, and every movement in or out of the property is logged. A neighbor told ITV, "You can feel it from the gates, the tension, like the whole place knows it's waiting for something to happen." Meanwhile, Andrew's daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, have remained publicly silent but privately distressed. "They're heartbroken," said a family friend. "They grew up there. That was their grandmother's home. Watching it turn into a headline is painful." Still, none of it changes the timeline. Spring remains the deadline, and the lodge will not wait. He can appeal, he can protest, but it's done, one Crown Estate insider confirmed. Come March, the locks will turn. For the palace, the move closes a chapter of embarrassment. For Andrew, it reopens a wound that never healed. But for the public, it sparks a deeper question. If Royal Lodge is being emptied, what exactly are they trying to leave behind? And what might still be waiting to be found before the gates finally shut for good? It began with a phone call that no one wanted to answer. A contractor hired to assess the condition of Royal Lodge ahead of its transfer reported something odd: an unlisted storage space beneath the east wing, sealed and undocumented in the official blueprints. At first, it was dismissed as rumor. Then came the memo. The Crown Estate's legal office quietly authorized a continuity review, a bureaucratic phrase masking what multiple insiders now call a second sweep. The operation has a name, whispered through Windsor's corridors: Cold Vault. Officially, this was about compliance. In reality, it felt like containment. According to sources close to the inspection team, the objective was clear: ensure that no material linked to the previous garage discovery remained on the premises. One insider, who requested anonymity, described the mood. "Everyone remembers last year. The files, the photos, the chaos. Nobody wanted another scandal hidden behind a locked door." By mid-November, a small convoy of unmarked vehicles entered the lodge at dawn. Staff were instructed to remain indoors, curtains drawn. The inspection was overseen by a discreet team of Crown auditors, assisted by a pair of plainclothes officers. Official statements later called it a routine inventory reconciliation, but insiders insist it was anything but routine. "They were looking for something specific," said one source, and they believed Andrew knew exactly where it was. Those suspicions weren't unfounded. Leaked correspondence between royal advisors, now circulating in Westminster circles, referenced legacy materials retained for personal safekeeping. The phrase triggered speculation across newsrooms. What were these materials, and why hadn't they been surrendered during last year's legal review? Some pointed to old correspondence, others to digital data tied to foreign accounts. A few went further, suggesting the items might relate to confidential communications from the late Queen's private archive. The lodge, already under a cloud of eviction and disgrace, now stood as a crime scene of secrecy. Even longtime aides seemed uneasy. "The place feels haunted," one gardener told a local paper. "Every time they open a cupboard, there's a story waiting to crawl out." Midway through the inspection, reports surfaced that one of Andrew's former house managers, a woman in her 60s who retired quietly after the first investigation, had reached out to a royal correspondent. Her statement, though unverified, caused a minor tremor. Not everything was logged the first time. Some things were removed before the auditors arrived. The quote aired on Sky News within hours, reigniting public obsession. In the days that followed, murmurs grew louder. Independent reporters began tracking down names listed in the first inquiry's redacted files. Several pointed out inconsistencies in the inventory descriptions. Missing hard drives, altered timestamps, a missing ledger page. "The gaps don't prove anything," one investigative journalist noted, "but they suggest someone wanted to tidy history before the house was." Within palace walls, anxiety turned to strategy. According to insiders, Princess Anne intervened privately, urging that any recovered materials be preserved, not destroyed. A leaked memo, initialed LA, confirmed her stance. All records of historical value should be transferred to the royal archives. Experts believe the abbreviation refers to Lady Anne, as she's known in internal correspondence. "She's protecting the institution's memory," said a former royal archivist, "not to shield Andrew, but to protect the legacy of her mother." Yet even as Anne pushed for preservation, others whispered about removal. Some claimed that an unnamed senior aide, under Camilla's direction, suggested relocating sensitive materials off-site for assessment. What that means, no one can say. But for those following the story, it sounds eerily like code for concealment. Outside Windsor, the media storm reignited. Headlines screamed about new files and fresh discoveries. Commentators debated whether Operation Cold Vault was about transparency or quiet damage control. On social media, the narrative fractured into factions, royalists calling it closure, critics branding it cover-up. Meanwhile, Andrew himself has remained mostly silent. Neighbors report he spends hours pacing the grounds, sometimes walking alone after midnight. "He looks lost," one witness told The Guardian, "like a man who knows the walls are listening." His lawyers have issued short statements, dismissing the second inspection as procedural housekeeping. But few believe that explanation, and the most intriguing detail comes from inside the team itself. A mid-level auditor, speaking to ITV under condition of anonymity, hinted that the inspection had, in fact, located items of interest. When pressed, they refused to elaborate, except for one chilling phrase: "Not everything in the lodge belonged to him." That single line has set off a new wave of speculation. Could the materials connect to another branch of the royal family? Were they remnants of a private correspondence between the late queen and her son, or something even older, from the Queen Mother's time? Palace officials refused to comment, citing ongoing archival processes. But within royal circles, the message is clear. The lodge still holds secrets, and those secrets are bigger than Andrew. A senior observer put it bluntly: "This isn't just about one man's disgrace. It's about what the monarchy keeps buried, and who has the power to decide what stays in the dark." As winter deepens, the air around Windsor grows heavier, as if history itself were waiting for permission to speak. And when it finally does, the question won't be whether Prince Andrew hid something, but whether the crown itself ever truly stopped. Dinner at Clarence's house was supposed to be quiet. A small family evening, just the king, Queen Camilla, and a handful of senior aides. But as one guest later confided, the air was so tense you could hear the silverware breathe. The conversation turned, inevitably, to Windsor, to Royal Lodge, the ongoing audit, and the headlines they couldn't control. And then Camilla, with her glass half raised, said the words that froze the table. Once those doors close, the ghosts will finally stop whispering. For a moment, no one spoke. The king looked down, expression unreadable. William, seated opposite, blinked hard, as though weighing whether to respond. It wasn't just a remark, it was a verdict. According to one source present that night, it was clear she meant more than Andrew. She meant the whole Windsor chapter, everything tied to the Queen Mother, the old loyalties, the shadow of Diana. She wants it gone. That dinner became the talk of the palace corridors. Insiders say it marked a turning point, when Camilla's behind-the-scenes influence became openly visible. The Queen is no longer the consort in the corner, one senior aide told the Sunday Mail. She's the strategist. The monarchy's future is being built in her image, streamlined, modern, and mercilessly tidy. Behind the velvet curtains of Clarence's house, decisions were being made at speed. A new directive, labeled Confidential Transition Plan, RL2024, circulated among top aides. It outlined the timeline for the lodge's repossession and, more controversially, the redistribution of its contents. Furniture, portraits, archives, all categorized, tagged, and reassigned. Officially, it was asset management. But in tone, it read like an exorcism. The most delicate section of the memo concerned historical and personal materials requiring internal review. That phrase triggered unease among staff, particularly those who remembered the chaos of the garage discovery. According to one former secretary, everyone knew what that meant. Anything too sensitive for the archives would disappear quietly before journalists could find it. Amid this, Prince William found himself drawn reluctantly into the process. As heir, he was expected to oversee certain estate transitions, though aides say he resisted at first. He told his father it looked cruel, said a palace source. But Charles reminded him that compassion doesn't clean the crown's image. Reform does. Hell. Even so, William's discomfort hasn't gone unnoticed. A senior correspondent from ITV observed that his recent public appearances have grown notably restrained, as though he's carrying something he doesn't agree with but can't oppose. Privately, sources close to Kensington Palace say Catherine has urged him to keep his distance from Windsor politics, reminding him of how his mother once fell victim to those same internal rifts. And then there's Princess Anne, the only one who seems unshaken. According to insiders, she has taken a quiet but firm stance in favor of transparency. Anne doesn't do theatrics, said a former equerry. She just wants the record preserved. She told advisors, destroy nothing. History always finds its way back. But her position has put her at odds with Camilla's camp. One insider described a clash of philosophies. Anne, the guardian of legacy, versus Camilla, the architect of control. They're polite in public, the source said, but make no mistake, there's frost behind the courtesy. Beyond the palace walls, the media has picked up on the tension. Columnists describe it as a silent power struggle between past and present. The tabloids, predictably, frame it more dramatically. The Queen cleans house, but Anne holds the keys. Yet beneath the headlines lies a deeper question. How much of royal reform is modernization, and how much is erasure? Amid the swirl of rumor, one new name surfaced: the Lodge Trust. Documents leaked to a financial journalist suggest that, over a decade ago, a discrete holding entity was registered under that title, managing maintenance costs and private patronage funds for the property. The trust's original signatories remain classified, but some allege it included both Andrew and an unnamed royal advisor from the late Queen's household. When asked about it, the palace offered no comment. But financial analysts note that the trust's last recorded activity predates the Queen's passing by mere weeks. It's the kind of administrative footprint that only makes sense if someone was planning a quiet exit strategy, one expert told Channel 4. Money moves before people do. As speculation mounts, palace insiders insist that everything is under control, yet control is precisely what seems to be slipping. Each revelation, each leak, adds new pressure to an already strained institution. Even the king's patience, once steady, has begun to waver. He's tired of cleaning up after history, one confidant admitted. He wants closure, but every time he tries to end a chapter, another page appears. For Camilla, though, closure is the point. She believes the monarchy can't survive nostalgia, said one veteran commentator. To her, sentiment is a liability. She wants clarity, not ghosts. But in trying to silence the past, she may be waking something larger, the memory of a public that has always sided with the wronged over the powerful. As Windsor prepares for the coldest winter in years, Clarence House hums with quiet plotting. The documents are being boxed, the inventories checked, the past rewritten line by line. Yet even as the machinery of royal order grinds on, one truth remains impossible to control. History doesn't obey palace memos. It waits, listens, and, when the time is right, it speaks. It was just past midnight when the trucks arrived. Their headlights cut through the fog rolling low over Windsor Great Park, casting long beams across the gravel drive of Royal Lodge. The operation was meant to be discreet, but nothing about it felt ordinary. According to one witness, the gates opened at exactly 12:43, and by 1 a.m., the quiet estate had turned into a scene of organized retreat. Prince Andrew stood in the doorway, pale under the porch light, watching as movers carried box after box into the cold night. He didn't say a word, a member of the security detail recalled. Just stood there, arms folded. You could see it in his face, that mix of disbelief and exhaustion, the moment he realized it was really over. Oh. Inside, servants worked silently, guided by a typed inventory provided by the Crown Estate. Every item, from antique lamps to family portraits, was labeled and logged. But one crate, several staffers later confirmed, wasn't on the official list. It was smaller than the others, sealed with reinforced tape and marked only with 3 initials, RLC. When questioned later, no one could agree on who authorized its removal. The supervisor said it was part of the archive. One mover told ITV, but it didn't match any of the tracking codes. It was handled separately, loaded into a van without paperwork. That van, sources claim, never made it to the official storage facility. Instead, the mysterious crate reportedly went to another royal residence, Frogmore Cottage. Once the home of Prince Harry and Meghan, it now stood mostly empty, its security detail reduced, but still active. Why that location? No one could say for sure. It's poetic, in a way, said a former palace aide. The exiled brothers' secrets ending up in the exiled couple's house, almost like the ghosts of the institution passing the torch of exile from one outcast to another. By dawn, the operation was complete. The removal trucks vanished through the mist, the gates locked behind them. Royal Lodge, for the first time in nearly 20 years, stood empty. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the heavy pause before revelation. The Crown thinks it's cleaned house, a senior journalist remarked that morning. But something tells me this story isn't over, not by a long shot. Within hours, speculation flooded the media. Social feeds lit up with questions about the missing crate. Some claimed it contained personal correspondence between Andrew and Epstein associates. Others whispered about unpublished photos or private letters from the late Queen herself. The palace refused to comment. Yet off-record sources admitted there was an issue of misplaced documentation. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, a damage control meeting unfolded before sunrise. Advisors debated how to frame the night's events, as a routine clearance, or as the dignified conclusion of a difficult chapter. But the public narrative was already out of their hands. It's not the boxes, a PR strategist told a tabloid. It's what people think is inside them. Perception is the real fire. And perception was spreading fast. The Daily Mirror ran the headline, "The Midnight Move, What the Palace Doesn't Want You to See." Commentators compared the images of the departing vans to a royal purge. One historian called it a Windsor exorcism. For Andrew, the consequences were deeply personal. Those who saw him that night described a man stripped of identity as much as property. He kept repeating, "Mother loved this house," one aide revealed, not angrily, almost like a prayer. Then he just stopped talking. Hezentubai. Yet amid the sadness and speculation, another question began to surface. If the mysterious crate really was rerouted to Frogmore, who ordered it, and why? Some suspect Princess Anne's discreet intervention. Others hint at a quiet directive from William's office to secure sensitive materials before they could leak. A third theory, the one now gaining traction online, suggests that Camilla herself sanctioned the move, ensuring that any document capable of damaging the monarchy's new image stayed out of reach. Whatever the truth, the symbolism is impossible to ignore. The disgraced prince gone, his belongings scattered, his secrets sealed in a house once synonymous with rebellion. History loves symmetry, one royal commentator said. And this, the passing of scandal from Windsor to Frogmore, might be the most poetic symmetry of all. As dawn broke over the empty lawns of Royal Lodge, a final team locked the main door and posted a notice for transfer of possession. The building was silent once more, its legacy boxed, sealed, and driven into the fog. But not everything had left with the trucks. Rumors lingered, whispers spread, and somewhere beyond Windsor's walls, a crate without a record waited to be opened. And when it is, the story may start all over again. As spring approaches, Royal Lodge stands empty but unsettled. Officially, the transition is in progress, yet multiple insiders confirm that certain rooms remain sealed, pending further review by Crown Estate officials. No one, not even Andrew's own representatives, seems to know when, or if, the final clearance will happen. For now, the Duke resides quietly nearby, in what aides describe as temporary accommodation, awaiting formal direction from the palace. His silence has become its own statement, neither acceptance nor defiance, just pause. He's waiting to see which way the wind blows, one royal source told The Times. He knows every move he makes will echo louder than words. Meanwhile, the reform agenda inside Buckingham Palace shows no sign of slowing. Camilla's consolidation continues, though critics within the royal orbit warn that her campaign for order risks deepening divisions. She's determined to draw a line under the past, a senior courtier admitted. But the past keeps moving that line. Princess Anne, consistent as ever, is said to be safeguarding certain materials for institutional review. Their contents are not public and may never be, but insiders describe them as contextual records of a sensitive nature. Whether they relate to Andrew, to broader royal archives, or to something entirely different remains unknown. Outside the palace walls, public speculation grows. Commentators ask whether Royal Lodge will ever reopen as a functioning royal residence, or if it will remain a symbol, the monument of a transition no one dares name. It's not just about Andrew anymore, observed historian Alastair Grant. It's about what the monarchy wants to forget and what the public refuses to. As of this broadcast, no official date has been confirmed for the Duke's complete relocation, and the Crown Estate's review remains ongoing. What's clear is that Windsor's story is still being written, one sealed door and one unanswered question at a time. Because if there's one truth history teaches us, it's this. In the House of Windsor, endings rarely end. They simply wait for the next revelation, the next photograph, the next whisper through the gates. Thank you for watching the final winter of Royal Lodge. Stay tuned, stay curious, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because this chapter isn't over, it's just beginning.